Picture this. You're standing in a parking lot in California. You see a guy decked out in designer clothes stepping out of a shiny new Tesla, only to look completely embarrassed when his credit card gets declined. Right next to him, there's a guy in a basic $11 t-shirt getting out of a beat-up older car, but he's quietly sitting on an investment portfolio worth over $1.1 million. Having worked in the US financial industry for years, I see this exact paradox play out every single day. Behavioral psychology tells us that as humans, we have this hardwired desire to signal our social status. And no matter what generation you belong to, society sets the exact same trap for all of us. It pressures us to prioritize flashy, outward signals over the actual substance of real wealth. Today, we're going to walk through the lives of Solo and Mike and see exactly how this invisible trap has been crushing their finances for over 11 years. But before we unpack Solo's story, I want you to pause for a second and ask yourself, are you spending money to actually live? Or are you spending money just so other people think you're living? Drop a comment below and tell me the most expensive thing you've ever bought just to keep up appearances. All right, let's kick back for a second. Grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's step into the world of a guy we'll call Solo. I want you to pay close attention to his journey because he represents millions of young adults I talk to, consult with, and advise all the time right here in the States. Honestly, if we are being completely real with ourselves, Solo's story might just be a mirror reflecting a hidden piece of our own lives, a piece we might not always want to admit exists. Picture Solo at 26 years old. He is the absolute poster child for a generation that prides itself on being incredibly sharp and financially literate. He's not clueless about money, far from it. Every single month, like clockwork, without fail, he faithfully invests $55 into the stock market. If you sit down across from him at a coffee shop, he can effortlessly talk your ear off about candlestick charts, the historical returns of index funds, dollar cost averaging, and the undisputed magic of compound interest. He knows all the right buzzwords, but behind that glossy facade of financial know-how lies a massive, invisible sinkhole that is quietly, day by day, draining his entire future. Because right alongside that measly $55 he sets aside for his future self, Solo has absolutely no problem burning through $550 a month on the latest tech gadgets, hyper-trendy designer clothes, and $8 artisanal cold brews. Why? Just to maintain this flawless, high-end aesthetic on TikTok and Instagram. You see, American consumer culture is an absolute master at weaponizing FOMO, the fear of missing out. It gets into your head and alters your priorities. Solo isn't spending this money because he actually needs a new mechanical keyboard or another limited edition hoodie. He's fallen headfirst into the trap of aesthetic performance. He uses his little bit of investing knowledge to delude himself. He uses that $55 monthly investment as a psychological shield to justify his reckless spending, telling himself, "Hey, I'm an investor, I'm doing great." All of this is just an elaborate play to convince everyone around him, most of whom are strangers, that he is living this incredibly successful, curated life. But speaking as a financial expert who looks at real numbers every single day, I want to share a real-world concept with you that I call the post-tax hour cost. Let's do a little bit of eye-opening math together. Let's say Solo decides to pull the trigger on a trendy designer bag or a sick minimalist desk setup that costs exactly $1,650. In our modern, frictionless world, it sounds so painless. It's just a quick tap of a phone, a swipe of a credit card, and a sudden dopamine rush. But let's look at the stark reality of the situation. In high-cost, high-tax states like California or New York, to actually take home $1,650 in cold hard cash, Solo practically has to earn somewhere between $2,300 and $2,500 in gross income. Before that money ever hits his bank account, he's getting hammered with federal income tax, state tax, and FICA deductions. If we convert that gross amount into his actual hourly wage, Solo is essentially trading 88 grueling hours of his life. That is 88 hours of hunching over a glowing computer screen, dealing with an overbearing boss, sitting in mind-numbing rush-hour traffic, and maybe even pulling stressful all-nighters at the office just to meet a deadline. I really want you to stop and think about the heavy weight of that for a second. He is giving up over 2 solid weeks of his life force, physically and mentally drained, just to buy a few hundred empty likes from people who don't even actually care about him. When you realize you are literally trading your blood, sweat, and precious time on this earth just to buy a social costume, you finally see just how brutal and exhausting this trap really is. And here is the harshest truth of them all. Time never lies, and the math always catches up. Let's fast forward 15 years into the future. Solo is now 41 years old. This is the exact age where a millennial should be stepping into their prime, enjoying true financial stability, and watching their accumulated assets work for them. Instead, the real, devastating cost of all that youthful flashiness rears its ugly head. That sick desk setup and that $1,650 designer bag? They're just e-waste and outdated junk now, sitting in a landfill, completely worthless. Those luxury weekend trips to Europe, or those sold-out VIP concert tickets that racked up millions of likes, are nothing but fading memories on an old hard drive. And the cruel irony of life is that you cannot cash in your memories to pay your medical bills when you get abruptly laid off during a brutal economic recession. Here in the US, as many of us know too well, losing your job usually means losing your high-quality health insurance right along with it. In that incredibly vulnerable state, one tiny slip-up with your health, one unexpected emergency, is more than enough to wipe you out completely. It's a massive, terrifying wake-up call. Solo is left entirely stunned, realizing far too late that the illusion of social status he spent so much time and money building online isn't throwing him a life raft in the middle of a financial hurricane. Memories are beautiful, sure, and experiences matter, but you can't walk into a bank and collateralize a memory to pay your mortgage. That sparkling, trendy facade he worked so hard to maintain at 26 quietly robbed him of his greatest financial weapon, the unparalleled power of compound interest at 41. If he hadn't been so obsessed with performing wealth back then, if he had just quietly, consistently invested that $550 a month into an S&P 500 index fund for those 15 years with an average market return, he'd be sitting on over $200,000 right now. That is a rock-solid shield. That is $200,000 of pure freedom protecting him from whatever curveballs life threw his way. But the reality he has to wake up to is bitter. At 41, Solo is flat broke, mentally exhausted, and suffocating under a mountain of credit card debt with predatory interest rates. That is the ultimate, heartbreaking price of choosing the signal over the substance. Solo's story isn't just a script for a YouTube video. It's a dark reflection of a toxic consumer culture that is silently eating away at our freedom every single day. Now, I want you to take a deep breath, let go of Solo's story for a moment, and hop on a time machine with me to meet an older, much more established guy. We are going to call him Mike. If Solo's story served as a painful lesson in the flashy, performative recklessness of youth, Mike's story represents a completely different kind of financial trap, one that is far softer, much quieter, but every bit as destructive in the long run. This trap is perfectly, masterfully disguised as success, maturity, and the picture-perfect family life that so many of us strive for in the American suburbs. Picture Mike at exactly 57 years old. He is an older Gen Xer who has built a truly stellar career, eventually climbing his way up to a top-tier income bracket. Unlike our young friend Solo, Mike isn't out there recklessly blowing his hard-earned money on superficial, trendy stuff just to impress strangers on social media. He's a deeply responsible family man whose primary motivation in life is simply to provide the absolute best for his wife and kids. But there is an ironclad, almost gravity-like rule in financial psychology that Mike completely missed. Every single time his income goes up, his lifestyle automatically and silently inflates to match it. In the financial industry, we call this incredibly common, wealth-destroying phenomenon lifestyle creep. For Mike, it didn't happen overnight. It happened one justifiable decision at a time. Every step up the corporate ladder came with a seemingly well-deserved upgrade. When his salary finally crossed over and hit 6 figures, Mike decided it was time to reward himself, trading in his reliable, standard sedan for a brand-new, fully financed Tesla. When that massive end-of-year bonus finally hit his bank account, he didn't invest it. Instead, he moved his entire family from a cozy, perfectly adequate townhome into a massive single-family house located in a highly sought-after, pricey suburb. The kids naturally started going to prestigious, expensive private schools, and every summer suddenly meant booking first-class family vacations to beautiful destinations like Europe or Hawaii. Looking from the outside in, Mike is the ultimate, undeniable symbol of American success. And honestly, if you sat down and asked him, every single spending decision felt perfectly reasonable, even necessary at the time he made it. He had the money coming in. He worked incredibly hard for it. So why shouldn't he and his family enjoy the fruits of his labor? But here is the devastating catch that ruins so many high-income earners. His massive fixed expenses grew exactly as fast as his impressive paycheck. Even though Mike was making way more money than his parents ever dreamed of making, his actual savings rate basically flatlined. The crucial gap between the massive amount of money that came into his account and the massive amount that went right back out on autopay every single month stayed exactly the same. Without realizing it, Mike was running on a grueling financial treadmill, sprinting at full speed, sweating constantly, making tons of money, but actually going absolutely nowhere. Then, the illusion shattered on one quiet Sunday afternoon. While Mike is in his sprawling driveway proudly detailing his shiny, expensive Tesla, he happens to look over at his older neighbor next door. This neighbor is a completely unassuming guy who is just driving a beat-up 11-year-old Toyota Camry, wearing basic, unfashionable clothes, and living in a modest, entirely average house that he hasn't updated since the day he bought it. For years, Mike used to feel this quiet, internal sense of pride about how much better, how much more luxurious his lifestyle was compared to the guy next door. But a massive psychological turning point hit Mike like a freight train when he found out, through a mutual friend, that this average, boring neighbor was quietly sitting on a massive $1.65 million Vanguard index fund portfolio. That was an earth-shattering, paradigm-shifting moment for Mike. Behavioral finance proves this wild, counterintuitive paradox time and time again. The people who look the wealthiest, the ones with the biggest houses and the newest cars, are usually the ones carrying the most suffocating debt, while the actual, bona fide millionaires in America intentionally choose to be completely invisible. That neighbor in the old faded Camry? He is the one who's truly free, because he doesn't need a single luxury item, logo, or zip code to prove his worth to the world. Mike, on the other hand, had a cold realization that he was completely trapped in a beautiful, gilded cage of his own making, forced to grind away at his high-stress job every single month just to feed his financed, monthly payment signals of success. Now, let's take an even bigger time jump into the future to see how this plays out. Let's fast forward 18 long years. Mike is now 75 years old, and at this vulnerable point in his life, he is coming face to face with one of the most brutal, unforgiving terms in American personal finance. He is entirely house poor. On paper, technically speaking, Mike boasts a very high net worth because that massive suburban mansion has multiplied in value after him living there and maintaining it for 44 years. But the harsh, inescapable reality of his situation is that his entire life's work, decades of grinding, is buried, illiquid, and fossilized inside those 4 brick walls. His 401k balance just isn't anywhere near big enough to safely maintain the massive overhead of his old, luxurious lifestyle. not to mention the ever-increasing property taxes and the relentless home maintenance costs that keep creeping up with inflation every single year. As his age advances and his health inevitably starts to decline, those staggering, unpredictable American medical bills start rolling in. Because all his wealth is trapped in real estate, Mike hits a severe, terrifying liquid cash crisis. You can't just chip a brick out of your beautiful living room fireplace or rip off a piece of your expensive roof and hand it to the hospital administration to pay your medical bill. You need cash, and Mike doesn't have it. And this leads to the most heartbreaking part of his entire journey. At 75, an age when a man should be relaxing, playing with his grandchildren, and enjoying the peace he worked so hard for, Mike is forced to make a gut-wrenching, painful decision. He has to sell the beloved house filled with 44 years of irreplaceable family memories, leave his deeply familiar neighborhood and all his old friends behind, and dramatically downsize to a much smaller apartment in a totally different state with lower taxes just to survive. The house itself wasn't the trap. The deeply ingrained belief that the house, combined with that high-end, outward-facing lifestyle, constituted an entire, foolproof financial plan. That was the real, insidious trap that completely stole his golden years. I really want you guys watching this, especially those of you sitting right in that prime wealth-building window between 25 and 40 years old, to take a long, hard look at Mike's picture. How many of us are unknowingly heading down that exact same perilous path? We relentlessly grind for those next promotions. We immediately treat ourselves to a higher standard of living the second the money hits our accounts, all because we deeply believe that it's the righteous reward we deserve for all our hard work and late nights. But hear me now, if we don't wake up, look at the math, and consciously separate the signal of wealth from the actual substance of wealth, we're really just dedicating the best years of our lives to building ourselves a bigger, shinier, and vastly more expensive gilded cage. But Solo and Mike's stories aren't here to make us throw our hands up and blame the system. Looking those brutal truths dead in the eye is the very first step to waking up and finding our way out. Both Solo, at 41 after life completely knocked him down, and Mike, at 75 after learning a painfully expensive lesson about his mansion, eventually found the light at the end of the tunnel. They realized that to actually win this game of money, you have to be willing to put your ego aside and accept looking a little poorer in exchange for letting your actual wealth balloon up. So, what's the real-world formula they both figured out to break this generational trap? A lot of financial gurus will tell you to cut your spending ruthlessly and tighten your belt to the absolute max. But from a behavioral psychology standpoint, that is a fatal mistake. If I forced Solo to cut out every single one of his aesthetic hobbies, or made Mike's family completely stop going on vacations, they would mentally burn out. The result? In no time, they'd fall into the trap of revenge spending. Exactly like someone who starves themselves on a crazy diet and then binge eats everything in sight. Instead, the right and far more realistic approach is to establish what I call a lifestyle floor. You need to sit down and clearly identify the one or two things that genuinely bring you deep happiness and positive energy. Maybe that's one really high-quality family vacation a year, or a healthy personal hobby. Keep the budget for those things so you can actually enjoy your life. But for all those other unnecessary expenses, the things you buy purely to put up a front or show off to outsiders, you need to be ruthless and cut them out completely. And here is the golden key. Never trust your own willpower when you're up against the massive consumer traps we have here in the US. The exact second your paycheck hits your account, you have to rigorously apply the pay yourself first rule using technology. Set up complete automation on your banking app. Let the system automatically pull a big chunk of your income, like 20% to 30% depending on what you can do, and invest it straight into index funds or retirement accounts like a Roth IRA or a 401k before you even see that money sitting in your checking account. When you automate your investing like this, the money left over in your account is your safe lifestyle floor. you have full permission to spend it completely guilt-free, because your actual future is already locked in and protected. That is exactly how Solo and Mike rebuilt their freedom from the ground up. Looking back after the storm, neither Solo at 41 nor Mike at 75 hold any resentment toward the past, because they finally unlocked the key to mastering this ruthless game of money. They paid in blood, sweat, and decades of lost youth to boil it down to 3 life-or-death lessons that I'm handing straight to you guys today. Number 1. The golden rule that will never go out of style. Assets always come first, and your lifestyle comes second. You've got to be patient and break the habit of using your monthly paycheck, the money you literally grind and sweat for, to finance a new car or upgrade your house. You are only allowed to upgrade your lifestyle if, and only if, the returns your investments are spitting out can actually cover that luxury. And you absolutely never, ever touch the principal. Number 2. Train your brain to instantly convert everything into post-tax labor hours before you even think about double-clicking for Apple Pay. When you're staring down a flashy purchase, just take a beat and ask yourself, am I genuinely willing to trade dozens, maybe even hundreds of hours of my life, stressing out at the office, just to buy this? And finally, true freedom has to be diversified. Mike's story is a massive reality check that you should never drain all your cash flow into a giant house, only to become a prisoner inside your own 4 walls. At the same time, Solo's epic fail is proof that chasing experiences or social media clout is just an empty flex. The absolute truth here is that you need to constantly stack up highly liquid assets like cold hard cash and stocks. Because here in the US, cash isn't just money. It is the ultimate leverage that lets you buy back your autonomy and take total control over the rest of your life. You see, escaping this trap isn't about sacrifice or living a miserable life. It's actually about stepping up into a completely different league. Here in the US, where everyone is constantly in this rat race of spending money just to scream at the world how successful they are, choosing to live a simple, understated life is actually the ultimate flex of power. I like to call this movement the quiet wealth flex, the absolute pride of keeping your actual net worth completely hidden. It's that feeling of confidently stepping out of a beat-up older car wearing a basic t-shirt, but having this priceless, deep-down peace of mind because you know your future is completely locked in by a rock-solid investment portfolio. So be proud of going against the grain. Have you ever successfully pulled an anti-flex, passing on a crazy expensive purchase so you could dump that cash straight into your investments? Drop a comment down below and inspire this community. Your real-world stories, even the small daily decisions, are honestly the most valuable and authentic lessons we can all learn from. And if you want to kickstart your journey to building real, substantial wealth today, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and open up the description box below. I've dropped the link down there to give you my ebook, The 7-Day Financial Declutter Challenge, absolutely free. Together, we're going to keep rolling out highly actionable, real-world money